I've spent a long time watching how people handle money, not in flashy ways, not by looking at statements or headlines, but by paying attention to how they live, how they make decisions when no one is watching, how they react when things go wrong. And one thing becomes very clear after a while: the way people handle money often causes more stress than money itself ever could. People chase higher income, bigger deals, newer things, thinking that will fix the tension inside, but it doesn't. The stress comes from the way they think about money, the choices they make, the rules they ignore. There are some very simple ways to reduce that stress, and oddly enough, they're often the things people overlook because they seem too ordinary or too slow to matter. But they do. The first one is controlling expenses. That sounds obvious, right? And yet it's rarely practiced with real discipline. People assume that if they earn enough, it doesn't matter how much they spend. But that's not how it works. The more you earn, the more pressure there is to spend to maintain appearances, to keep up with what others are doing. And once you tie your happiness or your sense of worth to your lifestyle, it never stops. That's why controlling expenses quietly, consistently creates freedom. It doesn't feel glamorous, and it doesn't make for impressive stories. But when your spending is predictable, reasonable, and within what you can actually handle, you sleep better. You don't wake up wondering if a bill will come due that you can't cover. You don't feel behind when someone else buys a bigger car or a nicer house. It's a quiet peace, but it's real. Over time, it compounds in ways that money itself can't match. People often ignore this because they think income is the main lever. Earn more, spend more, problem solved. But it's rarely solved. It's postponed. Every raise comes with a new standard, a new set of expectations. Your stress doesn't disappear, it just moves up a notch. But controlling expenses gives you a baseline. You can survive a drop in income, a market dip, a bad quarter without panic. That buffer, that calm comes from restraint, not from hustle. And that brings me to the second rule, which is having a buffer. Having cash or liquidity available for unexpected needs. Not just a little. Enough to feel safe. Enough to know that one problem, one setback, one surprise won't derail your life. This buffer doesn't have to be huge, and it doesn't need to make anyone else's eyes widen. Its value isn't in impressing anyone. Its value is internal. It's the feeling you get when a bill arrives, a car breaks down, or the market wobbles, and you know you're not in danger. That feeling is rare in our culture because our culture pushes growth, spending, performance. People get so caught up chasing the next thing that they forget the quiet strength of a reserve, and that strength is about emotional security. Money itself doesn't guarantee it, but having a cushion, a buffer, a little margin between you and the world reduces stress enormously. It allows you to think clearly, to make rational decisions, to avoid panic-driven mistakes. It's the difference between acting out of fear and acting with reason, and that difference is massive over the long run. The third rule is investing simply and with discipline. People often believe the opposite. They think complicated strategies, constant buying and selling, chasing trends, or trying to time the market will make them feel secure. It doesn't. Complexity creates stress because it constantly reminds you that there's something you might miss, some mistake waiting to happen. The more moving parts you introduce, the more pressure you feel to get it right. Every day. But simple investing, focused on what you understand, done consistently over time, quietly builds wealth and confidence. You don't feel like every day is a judgment on your skill. You feel steady. You feel in control without having to react to every headline or whisper in the market. And that steadiness reduces stress more than any short-term gain ever could. I've noticed that people who embrace these three things, control expenses, maintain a buffer, invest simply, tend to approach money differently. They don't panic over small losses. They don't overreact to good years. They make decisions from a place of calm, not urgency. That calm isn't boring. It's protective. It shields them from the mistakes that come from emotional decisions. It allows them to be patient, which is essential, because real wealth doesn't appear overnight. It appears quietly, gradually, like water filling a reservoir, and the only way to let it accumulate is to avoid unnecessary drains, avoid reckless moves, and respect time. People underestimate how much stress comes from chasing, more than you can comfortably manage, not because they're greedy exactly, but because they think the next milestone will change how they feel inside. A bigger salary, a fancier house, a newer car. They all promise peace, but the peace rarely comes. The real relief comes from knowing you can live well without depending on the next big thing. Controlling expenses gives you that. It doesn't make your life smaller, it makes it safer. It gives you choices. It creates breathing room, and breathing room is underrated. People forget that. They confuse motion with progress, movement with improvement, and so they keep pushing, piling stress on top of stress. But with restraint, they find space to think, to rest, to make reasoned decisions. The buffer, the reserve, adds to that freedom. It's the quiet sense of security that can't be bought in a single transaction. It's invisible until you need it, and then it's everything. I've watched people make terrible decisions because they felt they had to act when they didn't. And often, that urgency was because there was no buffer. One setback became a crisis, and a crisis became panic. But with a buffer, the same setback is just an event, a problem to solve, not a catastrophe. And because your mind isn't spinning with fear, you can see opportunities as they arise. You can think long term. You can stay rational when others panic. That clarity alone reduces stress more than most people imagine. Investing simply is harder to appreciate until you've seen the opposite. People pile on complexity, thinking it gives them control. It doesn't. Complexity magnifies every worry, every small decision, every fleeting doubt. You can't follow all the signals, and pretending you can add stress. But simple investing, focused, disciplined, and consistent, allows you to step back and observe without being caught up in the moment. You make your plan, you stick to it, you let the tea time do the work. And while the world races with excitement and fear, you move steadily. And that steadiness over the years reduces stress more than any quick win ever could. It's quiet, it's slow, it's effective. I've seen people chase higher returns and more opportunities, thinking that will bring peace. And for a moment it does. There's excitement, a sense of motion, a feeling of possibility, but it's temporary. The moment something goes wrong, the stress returns, often multiplied. That's why simplicity matters, not because it's boring, but because it's stable. It lets you keep your head, and keeping your head consistently allows rational, thoughtful decisions. Those decisions build confidence quietly, and confidence is the foundation of reducing financial stress. Without it, you're constantly reacting, constantly second-guessing, constantly living in small moments of fear that you can't see clearly at the time. People often underestimate the emotional cost of complicated strategies. They focus on numbers and charts, on potential returns, on stories of others who did well. But those numbers aren't feelings. They can't replace calm. And when feelings get ignored, stress accumulates. It hides in small ways: a restless night, a short temper, a sense of pressure that isn't explained by circumstance. Over years, it grows. Controlling expenses, having a buffer, and investing simply act like a safety net. They don't remove risk. They just keep you from panicking. And that difference between panicking and thinking calmly is enormous. It changes the decisions you make and the life you live. I've noticed that even small improvements in these areas have large effects. Someone who starts tracking spending carefully notices less worry at the end of the month. Someone who sets aside a small reserve feels less anxious when life throws unexpected bills at them. Someone who commits to a simple investment plan stops waking up to check every number, every market fluctuation. Over time, these small actions add up. They compound in ways that wealth itself can't. And the effect is not flashy. It's quiet, almost invisible, until you look back and realize how much tension has been removed from life. The human tendency is to seek immediate relief, to chase quick wins, to assume that the next move will make everything better. But financial stress rarely comes from being poor. It comes from being unprepared, from complexity, from lack of control. And the funny part is that the solutions are rarely new. They are simple, old, and reliable, controlling what you can control, protecting yourself against the unpredictable, and not overcomplicating what you do. That's it. No shortcuts, no magic formula, just steadiness. And steadiness over decades becomes peace of mind. I've also noticed that people who ignore these rules tend to regret it later, not because they failed financially in an obvious way, but because the stress took a toll. Decisions made under tensio, and sleep lost to worry, relationships strained because money conversations became tense. The numbers might look fine, but the quality of life suffers, and that's what most people fail to account for. Financial stress isn't just about what's in your account. It's about how it shapes your daily life, your mindset, your reactions. Controlling expenses, maintaining a buffer, and investing simply mitigate that. They make the numbers less important and the life more comfortable. These rules aren't about being frugal for the sake of frugality. They aren't about avoiding opportunity. They are about creating conditions where you can make decisions calmly, where setbacks are handled rationally, where success doesn't feel like pressure, where growth happens without unnecessary worry. And that's why these rules matter more than chasing higher income, more than exotic strategies, more than the excitement of the moment. They build a foundation that supports long-term thinking and long-term peace. And peace, after all, is the real goal, even in finance. Controlling expenses allows you to say no without fear. A buffer allows you to face surprises without panic. Simple investing allows you to stay the course without distraction. Together, they remove layers of tension that most people don't even notice until it's too late. They create clarity, they create freedom, they create space to think, to plan, to enjoy life rather than react to it. And that clarity is more valuable than any short RM gain because it keeps you in control of your life, not constantly chasing or running. I've watched people implement these rules quietly over years, and the change is subtle but profound. It's not something anyone else notices. It doesn't make you a hero. It doesn't make you rich overnight, but it makes the day-to-day lighter. Decisions come easier. Confidence grows. Mistakes are less costly because you're not reacting emotionally. You're thinking calmly, and calmness is the real measure of success when it comes to managing money, because money by itself doesn't guarantee happiness. It only amplifies whatever mindset you bring to it. And that brings me back to why these rules are so effective. They focus on control where you have it, protection against what you don't, and simplicity in action. They reduce unnecessary complexity. They reduce panic. They reduce fear of the unknown. And over time, that reduction in stress compounds. People who follow these principles tend to make better decisions, not because they're smarter, but because they're not acting from worry. They see opportunity, not threat. They take advantage of what's available, not react to what's missing. And that difference is invisible until it isn't. Until one day you look back and realize life feels steadier, lighter, and more manageable, all because you followed a few simple rules that most people overlook. Most people spend decades chasing higher income, bigger deals, more recognition, thinking that will fix everything. It doesn't. The stress creeps in quietly and it never leaves unless you make space for calm. Controlling expenses, having a buffer, and investing simply are the ways to create that space. They're not exciting, they're not glamorous, but they work. They give you freedom. They give you clarity. They give you the ability to make decisions from a place of calm rather than fear. And that, more than anything else, reduces stress, more than money itself, more than strategy, more than luck. Calm, steady thinking, protected by discipline, quietly builds a life where financial stress is smaller and peace of mind is larger. That's what I've learned from watching, thinking, and living with money for a long time.